Hi, I'm Rachel Darling. Welcome back to my BMI challenge. So this channel is about my journey towards getting to a healthy BMI. Right now I weigh 163.8 pounds, and at 5'0", that means that my BMI is obese. I am an obese person. I don't really think of myself as looking obese, but I am technically obese. And so the idea is that if I could make some lifestyle changes, that I might have a better time with healing from chronic illness. In particular, I have ulcerative colitis and fibromyalgia, neuropathy, arthritis, a lot of the kinds of diseases that come along with each other when people have chronic inflammation. So inflammation in the body is a big problem for me, and I'm looking for some non-drug ways to go about that. One of the things that's really important is I filmed a episode yesterday, episode 3 of season 1, where I talked about my ulcerative colitis and the surgery that I had in 2013. I had one in 2012, one in 2013. Today, I need to talk about the fact that yesterday I went to the gym for the first time. Not for the first time exactly, but for the first time working out with a personal trainer who understands my particular body and the multiple abdominal surgeries I've had, the adhesions, the kinds of ways that, especially with inflammatory bowel disease, and in my case, ulcerative colitis, I've really guarded my abdomen, and I have not engaged my abs at all for almost 10 years. And that's a long time. And with multiple hospitalizations, long hospitalizations, my body is very deconditioned. I try not to walk, where like a lot of my friends are getting 20,000 steps or 30,000 steps. You know, I am somebody who tries to keep it under a certain, I don't like to see the steps go up because I worry that I'm depleting myself of energy that I need. This is a mind frame that I have to change, and I'm going to continue working on it, but what I really need to recognize is how much fear plays a part in my lack of fitness at this point. And what I want to talk about today is how I know that fear plays a part for a lot of us, particularly in terms of getting started, but also in terms of overcoming an athletic injury. I think returning back after a pregnancy or particularly a surgical delivery like a C-section, or any point in your life where you're just trying really hard. I think also, like, if you are obese, a lot of times people who have been overweight for most of their lives and have been victims or survivors of bullying, a lot of bullying. And it's really important to think about like the fear of the gym and the fear of fitness as something that is totally legitimate. And I realize that I need to think about that for myself, and a lot of people probably also need to think about that. So that's what I want to talk about today. And so the way that I'm going to structure talking about this is 5 tips for what to do when fear is your biggest obstacle. Now, I'll tell you too how this came about was I did have a great workout yesterday. It was amazing. I felt great. I was scared. I was dizzy. I don't like feeling dizzy. It makes me feel like I'm sick. It makes me feel like something's wrong with my body. And I've had so many things go wrong with my body and so many near-death experiences that when I feel that kind of sense of dizziness, it just makes me panic. And that fight or flight response is totally like I don't blame myself for having that response, because why wouldn't I? It'd be weird if I didn't, after everything I've been through over the past 10 years and after what people generally go through when they have, very severe illnesses. It makes perfect sense that your adrenaline would start pumping when you start to feel your body get taxed in a way that it's not used to. So I tried to cut myself slack, and my trainer is amazing. She gets it. She really understands what it's like to be trying to find your feet, And and trying to push yourself for the first time in a long time, no matter how motivated you are, if you are experiencing intense anxiety or fear gripping you, it's not necessarily, it's a physiological thing, right? So what happened last night was after I got back, I cooked a healthy dinner. My food yesterday was awesome, totally on point. Vegan, oil-free, fresh, whole food stuff. And I was feeling really good. But then I went to bed and I was a little bit achy, and I woke up about an hour after I fell asleep. I woke up like every half hour, just getting more and more nervous about the fact that I was feeling sensations of pain. I have a lot of neuropathy from, like, especially in my left sciatic nerve, and in my, the under the tailbone area, where if you have a J pouch, which is the pouch that's created if you have your colon removed, which is what I have, if you have a J pouch, there's a lot of pain associated with that too. Very easy for a little bit of activity to make it get really, upset. And I've also been having some really bad days with my joints, particularly my knees and my elbows and my shoulders and my hips, those four tend to be my worst affected when I'm just kind of not doing my best in terms of flares or whatever else. I'm just recovering from a flare right now. So anyway, my joints, of course, I did like recumbent bike stuff. She had me do like really easy but challenging weight training. She manually stretched me, which was amazing. And the whole thing was very appropriate to my fitness level, but pushed me to really like what my current limit is, which is not very much. But anyway, so I started to have that thing that some of us have in the middle of the night where like things that are not that big of a deal were like a huge deal, and my mind, like I kept getting up because I think also a lot of people who have J pouches will know this. When you have a J pouch, when you feel like you have to go to the bathroom, you can. It's sort of I don't know, it's sort of too much information, but basically this internal pouch, like if you try to empty it, it will empty. So it's a tricky little brain thing, because if you get abdominal pain, or some kind of pain in the general pelvic region, you could think to yourself like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. And with a pouch, you can kind of always go. So you sort of reinforce yourself thinking like, oh, I thought I had to go and I do have to go. Anyway, that's just to say that I just kept getting up over and over again because I was just feeling a lot of anxiety. And I don't typically, I think I have a kind of within the typical range of anxiety in my life. But this was atypical for me to be like up all night. And I couldn't really, during the day, if I'm feeling anxious about like, ooh, I'm dizzy, maybe I'm going to fall over, maybe it's reminding me of some past experiences that have been really bad with my illness, I can usually just kind of ground myself and say like, listen, you're feeling a little scared, getting a little rush of adrenaline, and that's normal, natural response, but you don't need to panic about it because there's nothing bad that's happening and you could just sit down. In the middle of the night, I don't know why my imagination is always like, you're going to die. And so I turned on The Office, I was like putting a little Netflix on, put a little lavender hand lotion on, did the kind of things I'm supposed to do, took some Tylenol because I was really actually sore. And I was also experiencing something that I completely forgot, that kind of thermal, like when you feel kind of cold after you've had a good workout. Just experiencing that sensation of coldness reminded me of certain hospitalizations. So it's definitely a post-traumatic stress that I was experiencing. I mean, I'm not unaware of the fact that I've had trauma from my illness, and I do have a professional therapist who works in the Department of Gastroenterology at the hospital that my doctor's office is in. And she's been amazing in helping me with some cognitive behavioral therapy for, how to kind of correct for the trauma of my illness acts in my everyday life. But it's much harder for me overnight. So long story short, I got a terrible night's sleep. I barely slept at all. After I put this up today, I'm going to take a nap because that's what's best for my body. Even though I've got like a zillion things to do today, I'm going to have to kind of push my work schedule back a little bit, take an hour nap, try to keep my body like on track, even though I didn't get a great night's sleep and I had a high level of stress overnight. So I want to share with you what I did. Like when I woke up I was like, all right, we got to get out in front of this because you're not going to be able, you have to keep going to see your trainer. I mean, that was my first day yesterday. It freaked me out, like really freaked me out. I now know that I've kind of imprinted on myself this idea that it's a scary place to go. So I have to correct that because I'm going back on Saturday. I'm going 3 times a week. This is happening. We are committed to this process of losing weight. And I have 35 pounds to go. And I have to add some kind of exercise in because this is the lifestyle change that I'm making. So if I know that, and I know that fear is an obstacle for me, I sat down and I was like, what are 5 things that I know I can do or need to do in order to overcome this fear? So I want to share them with you because I think they're 5 tips that anybody could use when fear is your biggest obstacle to exercise. So first of all, number 1 is get support. And like I mentioned, I see a therapist at the office, the gastroenterology office. Not every gastroenterology office has dedicated therapists who are about that mind-body connection with the gut and the mind, but any therapist is a support for you. No matter what it is that's causing your fear of exercise, it's legitimate. I mean, you can't say to yourself like, oh, I'm just being a weakling, because I'm afraid to exercise. If you're afraid to exercise and you keep trying to like push that out of your brain and not like address the fear or resolve the root cause of it, you're just going to keep being more and more scared. So you have to get to the bottom of it. Or you have to develop behavioral tricks to get yourself through it. And you have to have a support system for that. I think a therapist is kind of the best way to do it. I also think that joining support groups for people, particularly if you've got an autoimmune disease or chronic illness, or that would be like a certain kind of support group. If you are a new mom and you're freaked out by your body, you're like, why is my body weird? Or you've never exercised before in your life and you're like 50, that there are support groups for everybody, right? So I think number 1 is you got to get support from somewhere else, and you have to have, particularly if this is like, if the adrenaline is pumping, this is something that's pretty deep and it's going to have to be, you need a pro to help you with it. Number 2 is to support yourself. And a lot of times for a lot of us, it is much easier for us to support other people than it is to support ourselves, right? I mean, it's the way it is. It's much easier for us to say, like if I were to see a friend struggling like last night, right? Like the way I was, I would be like, oh my gosh, you poor thing, you're scared. It's okay. Don't be scared. And it's okay if you feel scared. Let's get a nice cup of tea and let's sit down. Like that's how I should be talking to myself, right? That's how we should talk to ourselves when we get scared, is like in a way that is soothing, comforting, encouraging. Practicing positive self-talk is something that has been completely life-changing for me and has propelled me towards this lifestyle change that I'm making now, because I could not do any of this if I wasn't able to talk to myself in a supportive way. Do it. I mean, just think the way that I started doing it, if you're somebody who can't do it, the way that I started doing it was I have 3 sisters, I love them all, and I just sort of think, if it were my sister in the same situation, what would I say to her? And then I just say that to myself, And I've read a lot of research that shows like if you really, really need it, like if you're in a panic, you can kind of put your hand firmly on your chest and say those kind things to yourself out loud. And there's something about this supporting it, almost like an infant, that really activates your parasympathetic nervous system. I don't really know how it, the science of it, but something to try, and it's definitely something I do. So the third thing is you got to get, you're going to have to keep working out, right? Like you can't just not pursue fitness in your life. You're going to have to like even take a walk. And for some of us, like me, even taking a walk is really hard. I mean, I get freaked when I get outside. I get like, things come back to me from real life, like when I have passed out in the past or when I have had scary things happen. For other people I know, one of my sisters struggles with morbid obesity, and for her, she's always been overweight, she's always been teased. The second that she walks out the door on any given day, there's a social anxiety that comes over her that makes it especially hard for her to do things that are like showing that she's exercising, because she feels like she's putting herself in a position of being made fun of. And for me, someone who has not really struggled that way, it's difficult to put myself in those shoes exactly. But if I think about it for 2 seconds, I understand like that those are deep wounds. I mean, to spend your life being made fun of for something that you can't really control about how you look is a wound to your identity. So I think the thing is, how then do you kind of overcome that initial hurdle? For me, it's always the 5-minute trick. So I tell myself, I'm just doing this for 5 minutes. That's a little harder when I'm going to meet with a trainer, because it's kind of like, I think it would be totally awkward if I was like, after 5 minutes, I'm like, bye, I can't stay any longer, But that's my right, I don't really have to, sorry, someone's texting me like crazy. Let me get rid of this. That's my right to stop whatever I want to stop. And the thing with the 5-minute trick is, when you start it, you're probably going to keep going, right? If you like start your walk and you've been doing it for 5 minutes, you're probably going to do 20 minutes if that's what you set out for, or 40 minutes. So I think the 5-minute trick is key, right? Okay. So the fourth tip, I think, for overcoming fear as an obstacle to exercise is get somebody else to do it with you, right? Like the personal trainer in my case. The whole reason why I signed up to work with a personal trainer was because I knew that there was no way for me to, I would be too scared, just too scared that I'm going to injure myself, too scared that I'm going to pass out. I mean, this is where I'm at right now in my process. I'm not always going to feel like this. I know that, but I have to have somebody hold my hand for a little while I get started, and regain my self-confidence. So a personal trainer, for me, I squirreled away my little pennies for a while so that I could afford a month of 3 times a week. Not everyone's in the position to do that, or you may not have, don't have the time to plan for that. I planned for it for like a really long period of time. But it doesn't have to be a trainer. I mean, obviously it could be just like a workout buddy, some other person who's going with you. I mean, I think even your dog in some cases, if she's big enough, could be a workout buddy that helps you overcome the fear. Now, the workout buddy thing for me is like not about accountability. I think putting too much pressure on yourself only exacerbates the fear thing, right? I think you have to be like really kind to yourself, really loving to yourself. So I don't think it's about like this internal dialogue where you're like, this person's going to hold me accountable. For some people who are not dealing with fear as their primary obstacle, then I think the accountability thing works. But if really you're talking about like, I'm freaked, I'm scared, you want somebody who, you can kind of let know that that's what's up with you, that you feel a little bit nervous and you want to do this with them. And if you don't have a friend who can actually go with you on it, I think you can also overcome the fear by saying to somebody, like having a textable friend who you're like, I'm going for a walk and I'm freaked out that I'm going to pass out. I'm going to be back in 40 minutes. If I don't text you in 40 minutes, will you please like send the police? And it's not necessarily that you're going to really fall over. I think, sort of whether or not you're in shape to take a walk, right? But I think it's more like, how do you give yourself that confidence, the little safety net, somebody who understands like how nervous you're feeling at the start of things, and who can just hear you out when you, need to check back in, that you haven't like fallen over on the sidewalk and died, can be a big support. And, is this like, in some ways, this is stuff that we don't really talk about. Like these anxiety things that, especially when we're getting started, we don't talk about the fact that we're nervous about like things that are kind of irrational. And I think that it's really important that we do talk about this with each other, and we do say like, yeah, I have like irrational fears, because then they come into the light, and you can see sort of more consciously what it is that is an obstacle for you, and how when you can see that obstacle, I think you begin to be able to neutralize it, right? And so that leads to number 5. Like the 5th thing is you have to make a plan. And it can't be just like, so if I had an experience like last night where I kind of like imprinted on myself this deep fear of the gym and this personal trainer. She's perfectly nice. Everything was fine. But in the like dark of the night, I got really scared and really nervous. So I had this experience last night, like for basically the whole night, where I was really scared. I was really getting signals from my body that I was interpreting the wrong way. And it's easy for me, and I think it's easy for anybody who has any kind of anxiety, that once you make that impression on yourself, you have to like consciously turn the ship, right, to something else. So you have to make a plan. For me, so for example, the next time I'm scheduled to go see my trainer is Saturday, 10 a.m. I know that I'm going to be a little bit nervous probably on Friday night. So I've got to address like, what are the things I'm going to do Friday night to keep it low key and chill, so I go to bed like on time. I have to think backwards, like put in my planner, like I'm going to head to bed at 9 o'clock. I'm going to try to fall asleep by 10:30. I'm going to take a nice bath before, whatever it is that I'm going to do to like keep it chill. And then Saturday morning, like also Friday night, like lay out my workout clothes. Not like I'm going to wake up at 9 o'clock, hopefully not, I don't know, but I would still probably plan ahead the night before, just so my mind is like in the state of thinking like we're gonna do this, and then I might also just kind of figure out, make sure I've got everything kind of taken care of for the day, the rest of the day for Saturday, so I know like if I wanted to take a rest afterwards, I could have a rest. I would know what my meal plan was for the day, what I would be cooking, who I'm going to be seeing, what parties I might go to, or if I'm just going to chill with a friend and, watch a movie or something. Whatever it is that I'm going to make a plan for that day, because I'm going to try to neutralize anything that's going to come in the way for me, right? And it sounds kind of like, whoa, that's a lot of planning like on the daily for just like making your way around your anxiety. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like, for me, it's not, I don't have to do that every single time. What I have to do is recognize this fear exists. And I need to be able to neutralize what happened last night by putting this all into a positive place. Instead of going into the next one from this place of fear, I need to be going into it from a positive place, and that means making a plan. So a plan for the time, but also a plan for like, what kind of meditation am I going to do? How am I going to talk to myself? How am I going to be employing all of these other 4 steps, right? Like, I know my trainer, she's safe. I know that I'm going to tell myself I only have to do it for 5 minutes. That might help. I know I'm going to make sure that I talk to myself in a positive way. And I'm also going to reach out to the therapist that I work with at the gastroenterology office, and I'm making an appointment with her because this is a great time for me to talk about the fact that, I got like a little bit freaked out. And to have her kind of double check some of these behavioral things modifications that I'm making to allow myself to continue doing something that's totally new for me, that I haven't worked out this hard, as hard as I did yesterday, in over 7 years. And I have been instead, for the past 10 years, guarding my energy, guarding my body from strenuous activity, protecting my abdomen. I'm trying to do a lot in terms of reversing the way that I think about my body and the world. So that means I need to get some support for getting through that time so that I make sure that I keep the ball rolling in the right direction. So I hope these tips are helpful for you too. I'd love to hear about, how fear, the ways that you are kind to yourself when you feel afraid about your own fitness or afraid of exercise. And I'll see you tomorrow for another check-in on my little BMI challenge. This is day 4 of 60. Tomorrow is day 5 of 60. And now I'm off to my little nap. Bye.